I knew this was big 2 days ago when they said they foiled the Iranian plot to blow up the Saudi embassy in D.C. and assassinate people, claiming that it was Mexican drug cartels. I knew that that was a cover for the Fast and Furious subpoenas that they knew were imminent the next day or yesterday. Since then, Lieutenant Colonel Anthony Schaefer, who you better believe speaks for some of the better elements of the Pentagon and of the ruling elite of this country, he's reported in part of very important think tanks, heavily involved in trying to kill bin Laden, has blown the whistle on a lot of 9/11 stuff, the Super Congress. When he basically is unleashed to come out and say something, you know it's important. Schaefer talked to a high-level FBI agent with clearances who knows that it's not in the system, that there was not a plot. Repeat, not a plot.
We don't take any options off the table in terms of how we operate with Iran.
A familiar line from the Obama administration that has new meaning now that U.S. diplomats have spread out across the globe trying to convince the world Iran was behind a plot to kill the Saudi ambassador in Washington.
Hollywood script.
In announcing the plot, even U.S. officials said it sounded more like a movie than real life. An alleged Iranian-backed agent pays a Mexican drug cartel to blow up a D.C. restaurant and embassies? A lot of analysts are starting to say that doesn't make sense.
The issue is doing it by blowing up a restaurant in Washington doesn't fit, because that could invite, theoretically, from the Iranian standpoint, U.S. military retaliation, which the Supreme Leader clearly does not want.
And there are plenty of questions about the suspect, Manssor Arbabsiar, a failed used car salesman from Texas, whose colleagues are telling reporters he couldn't find his keys most days, far from a criminal mastermind. Still, the president insists what sounds like fiction is fact.
He had direct links, was paid by and directed by individuals in the Iranian government. Now, those facts are there for all to see.
The facts of a link to Iran, according to the criminal complaint, mostly because the suspect said he was working for his cousin, who he said was with the Quds Force, part of Iran's Revolutionary Guard. Arbabsiar also allegedly identified a picture of a known Quds member in a photo lineup and spoke to someone in Iran by phone, who, again, the U.S. government says is linked to the Iranian army. The White House says Arbabsiar wired almost $100,000 as down payment for the assassination, and he is on tape indicating it came from his cousin, saying, quote, he's got the government behind him. He's not paying from his pocket. Still, the U.S. government is not providing proof that the money did come from Iran or that the other suspect is a member of the Quds Force. But they are saying Iran will pay a price for this, and they are working right now to try and get the world to agree.
There's no motive. The story itself is completely bogus. This person who seems to be mad goes to Mexico. He says to a drug runner that I have a cousin who's a general in the Iranian armed forces, which no one in the world would give that sort of information to a mercenary. After all, he went to Mexico to have deniability. And then they wire $100,000. I mean, even if the people who made up the story had read a couple of spy novels, they know that they don't wire money, especially from Iran and to Mexican drug dealers. They would do it in cash. Then when he's in prison, he calls this supposed Iranian general, and he tells him on the phone to carry out the operation. I mean, come on the phone. A senior Iranian commander on an international line to the United States. It's completely unbelievable.
Iran had absolutely no motive for carrying this out. And then I would add, as a former professional intelligence officer, that all the details that have surfaced about this operation are ridiculous. No professional intelligence service, whether from Iran or anywhere else, would ever have run anything like this.
Yesterday, the FBI alleged it had foiled an Iranian terror plot. But the main suspect has been in custody since September. So why did the Department of Justice wait until now to announce this threat? Is it mere coincidence, as it comes at a time when House Republicans, as you've just heard, subpoenaed the head of the Justice Department, Attorney General Holder himself, for his marred gun-running program, Operation Fast and Furious, which, as you know, let military-grade weaponry get in the hands of Mexican drug gangs? What is your take on this alleged terror plot involving Iran. Is this the way the Iran intelligence agencies usually operate, engaging with somebody they thought were involved with Mexican drug gangs to assassinate a Saudi Arabian ambassador in a public restaurant in New York or Washington?
Well, it's a long way to get to a much easier target in other places, and no, I don't think so. And obviously, I've interrogated the Iranians. It's two chapters of my book, Operation Dark Heart, are dedicated to this, and that's what makes me think twice about this. The American that they're accusing here, Judge, was true enough. He has a dual passport, Iranian-American, but frankly, my experience has been directly that these people love being here. Once they're here, they love being here. And the idea of this guy, all of a sudden, after years being a successful, by all accounts, a successful used car salesman in Texas, part of the community, I would think it would be very difficult to imagine him just all of a sudden deciding that he's going to go against everything he's done for the past, for the past 15 years to do this. It does not spell correctly.
Manssor Arbabsiar, described by friends as a happy-go-lucky used car salesman and an unlikely orchestrator of an international terror campaign.
Yeah, Reza Sayed joining us live from Islamabad, Pakistan this morning. Reza, there's quite a bit of skepticism out there when it comes to Iran's alleged role in this plot.
Yeah, there's no question about it. Based on what we've learned about this man, he doesn't exactly fit the mold of someone who'd be picked to run an international terrorist plot. He's 56 years old, a divorcee, had a child, born in Iran, naturalized U.S. citizen, lived in the U.S. for about 30 years. His friends describe him as a sometimes disorganized, absent-minded, happy-go-lucky guy who was never into religion and politics. His ex-wife says she'd be shocked if he was involved in a plot like this.
I cannot, for the life of mine, think that he would be capable of doing that. He was at the wrong place at the wrong time. I'm sure of that. And I know that his innocence is going to come up.
There's been some red flags read about or said about this man at the center of the plot. The New York Times quoted some of his friends saying he's perennially disheveled, hopelessly disorganized, incompetent, not a zealot, no interest in religion or politics. The man that we're seeing on our screen, normally 48 hours after an event like this happens, some sort of plot like this happens, we start hearing about anti-Western rhetoric, we start hearing about extremists. Why aren't we hearing about that in relation to this man?
Well, I can only say that the FBI director and the Attorney General of the United States said that this was a plot blessed by the higher-ups in Iran.
Does that suggest then that the upper reaches of the Iranian government knew about this and blessed this?
We are not making that charge at this point.
What's important to remember, what sometimes gets lost in the drama, that this plot is purely an allegation at this point. Nothing has been proven. A number of U.S. officials have come out and said, look, we cannot link this plot with the leadership of Iran. Attorney General Eric Holder himself said we can't link it with the leadership of Iran. In spite of all that, the Obama administration is moving forward as if this was a real plot.
Yes, this was a real plot. And yes, this had to do with Iran. It is real. It happened. It doesn't appear that one would think this was a real plot. It was. We've been briefed by Treasury, by State, by CIA, and of course by FBI, now on 2 occasions, and run through it and run through all of the intelligence and the evidence. And I am convinced that it was for real. The question is why?
There's a lot of questions that surround this case. And I mean, first and foremost is what would Iran have to gain by going after the Saudi ambassador? I mean, a lot of people would easily argue that they would have more to lose than to gain. And if they want to go after a Saudi target or even a U.S. target, there's plenty in their backyard.
If you target an ambassador, he's going to be replaced by another ambassador. The foreign policy of the country you're targeting is not going to change because if you kill 10 ambassadors in a row. And for Iran, if they wanted to kill a Saudi ambassador, they could do it in the Middle East. It's very easy. They have Iranian agents all over the Middle East. It could be the Saudi ambassador in Iraq or in Lebanon. It would be very easy for them to do. Why would they bother to mount such a sophisticated operation on American soil, knowing that everything in the U.S. is intercepted by American intelligence, phone calls, emails?
Let's assume that the Saudi diplomat was a target. Why him? He's not a high-ranking Saudi prince. there are many more important than him? And why in the United States, in D.C., where security is higher than most other parts of the world? There are many ways to attack more important targets, if anyone wanted to do so, in the Middle East, including Saudi targets, which would be much more easy and create a much smaller reaction. So it's obvious that the Iranians were not behind this because A, the Iranians have no motive, B, it would be completely irrational. And then there's the third element about the story itself, which we'll discuss later, I'm sure.
Again, you know, what does Iran benefit from all of this? I mean, and the absurdity of it all, unless more evidence comes out that ties it makes it a tighter case, it looks like utter nonsense.
Yeah, I negotiated with them for nearly 2 years over Afghanistan, Al-Qaeda, and Iraq. So I've had a lot of up-close, detailed conversations with them. I've seen their national security strategy up close and talked to them about it for hours and hours and hours on end. What we've seen unfold makes no sense in terms of Iran's national security strategy. There's no benefit, there's no payoff from them pursuing this kind of hit against Al-Jubair, and it runs contrary to their entire national security strategy. So we have a plot but no rationale.
Does that make the allegations implausible, or are the allegations plausibly accusing the Iranians of something stupid?
Well, you know, any allegation is plausible, but I also served in the Bush administration in the lead up to the Iraq War, where I saw a lot of allegations come through paid informants like Ahmed Chalabi, and I raised questions about them inside the Bush administration, and everyone said, oh, but we know the nature of Saddam Hussein's regime, so even if it's stupid, they're so bloodthirsty, they would probably do it anyway. Well, here the questions really need to be asked again, and this time taken really seriously, because this would be such a significant departure for the Iranian government to be involved in something like this. It really warrants our toughest questions and scrutiny.
Well, let me ask you about one, I don't know if it's a parallel or not, but you say this makes no sense given their strategy. You think about the bombings in Buenos Aires back in 1994. 85 people killed. The Argentinian government blamed the Iranians for putting Hezbollah up to the job. It didn't make a lot of sense either, I guess, in some sense. Could this be the same kind of thinking that was behind that attack?
Well, that was a very specific, you know, to the extent that there was the linkage is clear. It was specifically tied to, according to Hezbollah, for the Israeli hit on the Hezbollah leader the year before. So there was a linkage to something that had happened. There's no linkage here to anything that had happened. For the Iranians, they've had a rivalry with the Saudis for a long time. In fact, between 1980 and 1988, during the Iran-Iraq War, the Iranians saw the Saudis as completely financing and paying for Iraq's war on Iran that cost 300,000 Iranians their lives. During that entire time, they didn't hurt a single Saudi citizen anywhere in the world. So the idea that today, that because they're not getting along, somehow the Iranians are going to go and bomb the embassy or a restaurant where Al-Jubair is, it really makes no sense. And what it does is it actually distracts us from the reality and the strength of Iran's national security strategy, which is doing a good job for Iran, both in terms of protecting Iran and in terms of turning the balance of power in the Middle East very much in Iran's favor and very much against the United States. We're missing the real story here, which is that the balance of power in the Middle East is turning toward Iran and away from us.
Exactly what it is that was thwarted here today.
Last question.
Mr. Attorney General, I have to ask you about the Fast and Furious investigation, if you can indulge me for 1 minute. The report is that they're preparing subpoenas on the Hill to get information from the Justice Department, naming top officials in the Justice Department. Apparently, the people on the Hill, your critics say, they just don't believe your testimony, in essence. So what do you have to say about that? How will you comply with the subpoenas?
We have sent thousands of pages of documents up to the Hill. We'll look at the subpoenas. I'm sure we will undoubtedly comply with them. But what I want the American people to understand is that in complying with those subpoenas and dealing with that inquiry, that will not detract us from the important business that we have here to do with the Justice Department, including matters like the one that we have announced today. Thank you.